for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. My name is Darren Gibson, and I am your co-host.
My name is Jack Prince, your fellow co-host.
Well, Jack, we've got a lot of good stuff to talk about. We're going to flip the script a little bit. We're going to talk about the murder of George Floyd and the protest and some of the fallout that has happened. But there's been a lot of good fallout from this, and we'll get into some of the details in just a minute. Before we get to that, a couple of reminders that you can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime you like at Spreaker.com. Do a search for Southpaws there. You can also find us at the iTunes Store. Do a search for Southpaws under podcast, and once you've found our logo, you've found us. Links to our podcast are automatically sent to our Facebook, Twitter, and our YouTube pages. If you're listening at YouTube, go to youtube.com and do a search for Southpaws Radio there. And you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI-FM Taos, New Mexico, KZGM Kabul, Missouri, and Global Community Radio Channel 1. We're on every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Make sure you listen to us there. Well, lots of good news, as I said, that has come out of the George Floyd murder and the protests.
Maybe none better than the fact Trump lost 10 points from May, from 49 down to 39 approval rating.
Oh, nice.
And it's still sliding.
Yep. Some of the things, a story that came out this morning was that the Denver Public School Board, in a 7-0 vote, unanimous, voted to send the police packing out of their schools.
It's incredible.
Could you ever believe that something like that would happen?
In my wildest dreams. In my wildest wish list.
And more schools are looking at getting the cops out of the schools.
It's incredible. I had to keep pinching myself.
Oh, I know. Me too. What else has happened?
Well, you know, the big thing, obviously, is the City Council in Minnesota. Speaking of unanimous votes.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, we didn't even mention that before we started recording today.
I mean, is it not the Paris Commune, Catalonia, in Seattle, where 6 or 7 square blocks?
Yeah, six square blocks have been taken over. They're calling it Chaz. The city officials are now starting to spread lies about this group and say, oh, they're now asking the store owners to pay up for protection in this area. It's called extortion. Yeah, I don't think that's happening.
That's total BS.
Yeah.
Again, the Paris Commune. In that area, there was no spousal abuse. There was no crime. There was no destruction of stores. The destruction came when the fascists marched in and wiped out the Paris Commune. And a bigger example of anarchist utopia, a term that conservatives just get driven up the wall on, was in Catalonia, where it lasted much longer than in Paris. And those two examples of a completely free, non-authoritarian atmosphere, people should read up on. I recommend the book Ode to Catalonia by George Orwell, the genius. You will be amazed. You will sit there and shake your head when you read at the absolute atmosphere difference. We talk about the clean air because of the COVID virus and the cars not driving around. The atmosphere, the air, the environment, the cultural environment of the times when, they burnt every church to the ground, just for starters, okay? Then they went and made one law. The only law was you could not address anybody as sir. There was no more distinctions. It was an egalitarian environment. People traded services for goods. Nice. There was no cash. There was no money. There was no police force. It was an absolute heaven on earth, and I'm not exaggerating. Ode to Catalonia, rated absolutely in the top 10 political books of all time. If you're wondering what's going on in Seattle, if you think it's a bunch of crazy hippies, it's a little deeper than that. And there's a history of that, which will show you exactly what's going on if you want to pick that book up.
Yeah, that's a good book to get. So we'll keep an eye on what's happening in Seattle, because Trump is now threatening the local government there, the governor as well. Take control of your city or I'll do it for you.
Yeah. Well, he had that threat before, remember?
Yeah, D.C. Oh, let's take over the D.C. Police Department. And the mayor said, no, you're not.
Oh, man. Geez, June 1st, right?
Mm-hmm.
He deploys military forces. He attacks peaceful protesters. 17,000 National Guards were deployed in the Capitol. Okay, but that wasn't all. He had 9 Black Hawk assault helicopters, thousands of National Guards from 6 adjoining states, unmarked and unidentified military police, combat troops from the 82nd Airborne Division, which were told to pack bayonets.
Yep.
And then from June 1st to what is today? The 11th?
We are recording on 12th. June 12th, Friday, June 12th.
Okay. So in 12 days, we are now hearing the call to defund police and military. I've heard of backfires before, but man, that blows the muffler right off of the car. That's incredible.
Yeah, we briefly mentioned the city of Minneapolis. The city council says they now have enough votes, veto-proof votes, to disband the police department. They're not talking defunding. They're talking about firing them all and starting over again.
Unbelievable. You talk about good.
And that needs to happen all over Philadelphia, New York City, hell, Grand Rapids. Let's start there, right here in good old River City.
Yeah, let's do that. But to defund the police and the military, you know, we handed over to the corrupt leadership and the fascists of this country the complete devotion to the military. Whatever they wanted, they got. We did the same thing for the police, such as you mentioned the show Cops, which has been ended.
Oh, let me go ahead. I've got the music right here. I hope we never, ever have to hear this theme ever again.
Yeah.
I don't know where Inner Circle's going to get all the royalty checks after Cops gets canceled. Oh, wait, it's already been canceled. Yeah, I've got the story right here. This is James Hibbard writing for Entertainment Weekly. This is dated June 9th. Cops has been canceled. Paramount Network has decided to dump the long-running true crime reality TV series. Cops was already pulled from the cable channel after nationwide protests of police brutality and racism following the death of George Floyd on May 25th. Now the network confirms the series has been permanently shelved. A network spokesman said Cops is not on the Paramount Network, quote, and we don't have any current or future plans for it to return, end of quote.
Hallelujah.
By the way, 32 seasons worth of Cops. So think about it. 32 years this program has been on the air. The first 25 on the Fox network, and then Paramount's predecessor, Spike TV, picked it up after Fox canceled the show. But that's just not the only one. Oh, there's another victory. A&E Network, the day after Paramount announces that Cops has been permanently canceled, A&E Network announces they are permanently canceling Live PD, which is basically Cops on steroids, if you haven't seen it.
I haven't, but you were telling me about it.
Oh, yeah. For those of you that don't know, Live PD was essentially Cops, but they ran everything out of a live studio. They would put a map up on the screen every so often. Dan Abrams was the host of this show. And then he had a couple of cops that would be his co-hosts, I guess. I don't know. Play-by-play, color, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. But they would have these cops come in, 2 of them, with Dan Abrams, and they would go to the map. Let's go to Lafayette, Louisiana, where Officer so-and-so has pulled over a car They believe that the people in the car are suspects involved in a robbery that occurred earlier today, and it's live. They run a little bit on a delay just in case there was a death or shooting or gore or anything like that. Right. But essentially it was live. They would have at least 2 cameramen with backpacks that emit a signal. It used to be in the good old days, back when I was working in television, if you wanted to do a live shot, you had to have a microwave truck and patch everything in, or a satellite truck. Not anymore. The news organizations now have a nice little self-contained backpack that does live stuff. The backpack will generate its own internet signal if there's no internet around, and be able to send stuff back to the station. So that's what they used for live PD. And they were in at least a dozen cities a night, and they would rotate it. So they had all these different crews. Yeah, it's good that both of those shows have been canceled. This is basically the glorification of police violence, having these shows on the air.
Oh, yeah, they worked hand in hand with the police department.
Oh, they did.
Those were staged events. I mean, the people who have been protesting it, and believe it or not, there were groups that were fighting that show for all those years, Darren. Mm-hmm. And they kept saying, hey, we don't get a balance here. We don't see anything negative about the police. It puts a strong light on racism because they can cherry pick. Mm-hmm. If they want to have 5 black people apprehended and 1 every 3 shows or something, that sets up some kind of a numerical precedent, which is totally unfair. The shows were corrosive. They were toxic. It's amazing they lasted that long.
Yes, indeed. I agree with you there. But people love that stuff. Cops was basically the start of reality television, if you really want to think about it.
Yeah.
And people ate it up.
Yeah, it's true.
But
it's too much for these people. These racists who've grown up in this, and it's never been challenged, it's too much for them to even hear the term defund the police. That is so contrary to their belief system. It's heresy at the utmost level to talk about defunding the military and the police.
Yeah,
I love it. I just love it. And a lot of Democrats that for a long time play the progressive card, as we've pointed out, but in fact, they're all for funding the police. They've been doing it for decades. And then you turn around, as Jeff Smith right here in this city of Grand Rapids has pointed out, and take huge contributions from the police unions. And then they're rewarded back by the legislature in ways that allow them to get through the racism and their violent acts without any spotlight. So, you've got right now a cultural revolution going on, ladies and gentlemen. And what Darren Gibson is pointing out are the fruits of that revolution. Keep it rolling. Don't stop. Keep it going. Man, oh man, it's exciting.
It is. Well, there's more. Not only are we getting rid of cops on TV, the Marines have gotten rid of the Confederate flag. I have this story. This is David Choi writing for Business Insider. This is dated June 5th. The U.S. Marine Corps has officially banned the Confederate battle flag from both public and workspaces on its military bases, including its display on vehicle bumper stickers, clothing, and coffee mugs. In a statement, the Marine Corps said, quote, "The Confederate battle flag has all too often been co-opted by violent extremist and racist groups whose divisive beliefs have no place in our Corps. Our history as a nation and events like the violence in Charlottesville in 2017 highlight the divisiveness the use of the Confederate battle flag has had on our society." End of quote.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Now NASCAR taking that down, the flags down.
Yeah, that's.
I just can't believe it's the panacea that the conservative in the South had. He went to Sunday school at 10, dropped the kids off. Then he got his case of beer, got the 4-wheel pickup ready to roll to the racetrack, right? And enjoyed the absolute wall-to-wall banners of Confederate flags. And it's not there now. It's a huge part of the picture that they're used to. This is not just one small segment, and I don't care how sincere NASCAR is. You have a guy who murdered Charlottesville innocent people with a backdrop of Nazi flags. How many years ago was that?
That was
Confederate flags.
2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah. And NASCAR at that time patted them on the hand and said, hey, we'd prefer you should not have those. How about replacing those with American flag? That's even more racist. So you use that flag.
And
my words, not theirs.
And not only that, didn't NASCAR at one point issue an edict saying their drivers were not allowed to take a knee? If you took a knee, you don't race?
I'm sure of it.
And I believe that was the same with the crew members. If a crew member took a knee during the anthem, you're out.
And now we have a black driver that just raced with the words Black Lives Matter painted onto his car.
Bubba Wallace, the only African-American driver on the circuit right now. And by the way, it's good on Bubba Wallace that he was able to do that, but I'm going to give credit where credit is due, because Bubba Wallace's owner of the team is Richard Petty, the absolute king of NASCAR.
Yeah.
So for Richard Petty to allow that is something. And hats off to the king. I
would agree. But as Bubba Wallace went around the track, all the other Bubbas up in the crowd, you could hear a collective moan as the car went by.
That was the crowd at home, because they're not allowed to have spectators at the races right now.
I'm being facetious, but because it pained them to see that car go by with Black Lives Matter.
Oh no, it gets even better. There's a NASCAR driver on the Truck Series circuit.
Yeah, right.
Who has
won one race in how many years?
He's had one top 10 finish out of 32 races. He's never, other than that, he's never finished higher than 25th, and he's now saying, I'm quitting NASCAR because of the ban on the Confederate flag.
Oh wow, that's what a blow to NASCAR. Didn't NASCAR say they didn't know who the guy was?
I think that was a joke. That was a joke.
Well, that's a funny joke, because how would he have any notoriety? Was it 83 races or something?
No, it was less than that. He only made it to 32 races.
Jeez.
In 3 years. He's independent. He's owner driver.
Well, don't you think you got to be pretty stupid to reveal the fact that you couldn't drive yourself out of a wet paper bag, and now that's going to overshadow the whole thing. His whole so-called racial statement. That's really typical. They are so stupid.
Do they make paper bags that'll fit a 2-mile oval racetrack inside of it?
Well, you couldn't have a list. No. You couldn't have a list. What's the word? You couldn't have a flatter career. You'd have to think, if you're going to start shooting your mouth off about, having to leave the circuit of the NASCAR, that somebody would point out.
But Jack
is a terrible driver.
But Jack is only flat in the straightaways. The straightaways. The rest of the curves have to be banked in order to get the momentum going.
Yeah, wasn't he in Talladega Nights? Wasn't he sitting there in that restaurant in the background? I think I saw him.
Well, you remember what our former co-host Jim Gerner used to say about NASCAR. Non-athletic sports centered around rednecks.
Well, he's got it. Started by a bunch of rum runners down through Highway 41 through Tennessee and Kentucky that were, shipping booze in the back of the car, so they put a big engine in, and then they'd race.
Well, some of them were still bootlegging even after NASCAR started. Junior Johnson, the legendary car owner, got banned for a year because he was busted. He went to jail for driving moonshine. And NASCAR went to him and said, here's the deal. You can either be a moonshiner or you can be a stock car racer. You can't be both. And he made the right choice because he made a lot of money as a car owner and as a driver.
It's interesting, Darren, if you do a little history on the origin of these institutions and these sports. For example, the police. So down in the South, they were the patrols that gathered up runaway slaves.
Yeah.
And that's the headwaters for the police department. And now you look at NASCAR, the headwaters for those are a bunch of drunk rum runners that made an illegal life down in the hills and the hollows.
Yeah.
Yeah. History's a bitch.
Yes, it is. But white people like to erase history. What was the textbook that said that, I believe it was published in Canada, that said that, is either Canada or Texas, I forgot. It basically said the slaves were voluntarily came over. They wanted to come here. Yeah.
I saw that, yeah.
BS.
Yeah, and then later on I saw another one that the people gave up their land willingly here. The Indians were, charitable.
Wow.
So they just donated the eastern seaboard to the Europeans. I know. But speaking of history, have you heard about the new history online class being taught here in Grand Rapids by a guy named Jack Prince and Joe Anderson? It's called Old Farts Teaching Liberal Arts.
Is this a real thing?
Well, we kicked it around. I don't know if that'd be our moniker or not, Darren, but there's so much misinformation. We thought, hey, we know how to make lesson plans. We did it for 25 years. How about just some basic history? Because they're not getting anywhere else. Mm-hmm. Just some, like the history that took place in Tulsa, which I think you posted on Southpaws, if I'm not mistaken, where now Trump, in his inevitable form of racism, plans on having a rally, a protected rally.
Jack, let's skip that one for a minute, because we'll get to that after we get
Have
through
you got
the rest
that
of
on
the
the
good
list?
news.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, we can't miss that.
No, I actually like the idea of old farts teaching liberal arts. You really need to do this. Start up a YouTube account. No, I'm dead serious. Start up a YouTube account.
I think there's a need for it, in all seriousness.
I think you guys have hit on a perfect idea. You really have.
Well, we kidded about it, but so many times we see things that are mistakenly said, and it just bugs the crap out of us. So, Joe's a longtime history teacher, and he's a black American that was a straight A student at Kalamazoo College that, we're just sitting around half the time, so we may do it.
You know what? I got an even better idea. Why don't you produce that down at GRTV?
Yeah, I guess we could. Just
sit in the studio and record and just have at it, man. Let me tell you.
The fields are white on the harvest. Really, they are.
Yeah. Well, we've got more good news. I have this story. This is Carla Herrera Russo writing for the Huffington Post. This is dated June 5th, actually. In a major reversal, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell admitted on Friday that the organization was wrong for not allowing NFL players to peacefully protest police brutality against black people during the national anthem. In a filmed statement posted to Twitter, Goodell said, quote, "We, the NFL, condemn racism and the systematic oppression of black people. We, the NFL, admit we were wrong for not listening to NFL players earlier and encourage all to speak out and peacefully protest. We, the NFL, believe Black Lives Matter." End of quote. Can you even imagine that ever happened?
No. In my wildest dreams.
No. I tell you what, if the NFL wants to get really serious about it, the solution is simple. Rehire Colin Kaepernick. Some team needs to pick Colin Kaepernick up and put him on a team and let him be the star that he is.
Well, wouldn't that be the fulfillment of a real acknowledgement? Because he's totally talented enough. He would start in half the NFL teams, or at least he would have the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's one thing to, make all these magnanimous platitudinal statements. It's another thing to turn around and ban the police. Mm-hmm. And charge the other three police, and give Kaepernick a job. Put some action to these words, because in many cases they're just to appease people. So as you said, that would be the real statement of conviction if you turn around and give this guy a contract. Mm-hmm. If I'm not mistaken, Martin Luther King III said there should be a boycott on the NFL until he signs.
Yeah.
It's one thing to protest, but make some specific demands. That's when you go through this list, Darren, the results of the protesting, their actions, their direct actions and legislation. So the one you're talking about, getting this guy back on the field, would be startling. But why not? Dreams are coming true.
Yep. At the end of this article, they mentioned something that we have an update to. They had mentioned Breonna Taylor being shot to death in Louisville, Kentucky. She was just in her own apartment with her boyfriend, sleeping. All of a sudden, the police start breaking in the door. The boyfriend thinks that somebody's breaking into the place to rob him. He pulls out his gun, starts shooting at the cops. They return fire. They kill her. They shoot him 8 times. Somehow he survived. And they arrest him for attempted murder on the police. That was until after the 911 call was released where he called in to Louisville Police Dispatch saying that somebody broke into his apartment and they've killed his girlfriend and he's been shot multiple times. And he's begging for her to breathe.
And that brought us specific action from the Louisville politicians.
The city council in Louisville. Yes, yeah. They have now voted, and I believe this happened on Thursday. They voted, and it was unanimous. No more no-knock warrants in Louisville. Ever.
Yeah, so instead of some platitudes and, hey, we're going to pray about this, right? Things are getting done this time. That's the difference.
Yep. Now, for those of you that don't really know what a no-knock warrant is, basically this is used when police are looking for drug dealers. Here's how it works. They just break into the door, and they don't announce who they are, and then they come in and surprise you with a warrant. The reason that they do this, the so-called reason that they do this, is they don't want drug dealers to take the drugs and flush them down the toilet. Well, I was listening to wrestling legend Jim Cornette, who lives in Louisville and has seen all the local news stories about what happened to Breonna Taylor. And he said something on his most recent drive-through podcast that was prophetic. And it was a police chief, and I forget where it was, told his cops, look, if you're worried about a drug dealer flushing drugs down the toilet, you're going after the wrong drug dealers. You're an idiot. And
some kid with a joint he's trying to get rid of. Come on, these aren't the big boys.
Yeah, exactly. Which really, when it comes down to it, the war on drugs shouldn't even take place in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
What countries have been successful with how they handle drug problems? It's the countries that have legalized everything and have put those resources into treatment programs. There it is. It's science, folks. It's science. But, again, we live in a country where science is denied literally on an everyday basis, and people go around with their head up their own ass.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how they walk. I haven't been able to figure that out yet. But, anyway, a little more good news. I have this story. This is Keith Kaufman writing for Reuters. This is dated June 6th. A U.S. District Court judge ordered Denver police Friday not to use tear gas, plastic bullets, and other less than lethal force such as flash grenades against protesters unless approved by a senior officer in response to specific acts of violence. The temporary injunction was in response to an ongoing local lawsuit filed on Thursday in Denver District Court by protesters complaining about excessive force used by officers during demonstrations following the death of an unarmed black man, George Floyd, in police custody in Minneapolis last month.
First of all...
Oh, go ahead.
What is that term? Less than lethal?
Less than lethal.
That's ridiculous. Have you seen these so-called rubber bullets?
They're huge.
They're gigantic.
Mm-hmm.
They're not rubber. They should never be used on protesters. They should never be used anywhere short of war.
Yeah. The thing is that the cops are purposely, they're doing this on purpose, using them the wrong way. Rubber bullets are supposed to be fired at the ground so that when it hits, it disintegrates and it scatters like buckshot.
Yeah.
But that's not how the cops are using these.
No,
they're shooting
right
directly
in the face.
In the head. Yeah.
Yeah. Police should never use rubber bullets versus civilians. That's what the experts are saying. There's an article I have from thetrace.org. It's unbelievable. And secondly, tear gas is much more destructive than people realize.
The use of tear gas is banned by the Geneva Conventions.
Yeah, exactly.
Why are we using it against our own people?
See, all of these stereotypes and all of the layers and layers of propagandic crap that's been thrown at us is getting unraveled. We've put up with rubber bullets for decades. And we go, now we're looking at these damn things that are huge and we go, these are rubber bullets? Stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Tear gas? Stop it.
Yeah.
Keep going with good news, man. I'm sitting with a bigger and bigger smile.
You know what? I think we're getting close to the end of the good news here.
Well, I got one. I got one that really, it's bye-bye Tucker Carlson.
Oh, yeah. Old Tucker Carlson is losing advertisers yet again because of his mouth.
Because of the fact he's a blatant racist.
Yeah. Oh, but there's people, that even some that call themselves progressive. Well, Tucker Carlson, he was telling the truth about the coronavirus and how it was a public health issue. It's the old broken clock is right twice a day fallacy, folks. That's what Tucker Carlson is. He is a broken clock that's right twice a day. Or if you're Rick Perry, once a day. Oops.
Yeah. But the hits just keep coming, Darren.
Oh, I've got a little more good news. I have this. This is from WWBT Television out of Richmond, Virginia. This is dated June 9th. The Christopher Columbus statue was torn down by protesters in downtown Richmond Tuesday night. Happened about 9 p.m. at Bird Park following a peaceful demonstration outside of the statue in honor of indigenous people. Shortly afterward, the statue was ripped from its foundation, spray-painted, then set on fire. After that, the statue ended up in the lake. Well, they had to put the fire out somehow, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, to an indigenous American, a statue of Christopher Columbus is like a statue of Adolf Hitler for us. And I would point to the statue that is in Sweden. I don't know the exact location, where in 1985, a group of skinhead neo-Nazis were walking down the street, and a woman in her 60s attacked the leader and hit him in the head with her purse. Today, there's a statue in that square commemorating an act against real racism and violence by a woman, not lethal, not a rubber bullet, but an act nonetheless that demonstrated her complete disgust. That's the kind of statue we need. We don't need statues of a guy who enslaved the indigenous people of the United States and sent them back to Europe like they were canaries in a cage, like something to amuse the royalty back in Spain so he could keep getting money to come and plunder the gold. We don't need statues of Confederate generals or our military bases with signs out in front, Bennington, Hood, et cetera, that were generals plotting to overthrow the sovereignty of the United States of America. We don't need those. We don't need a statue of Christopher Columbus, who in his creativity discovered and developed a mask that you could put on the American Indians so that when they were put into the caves, where they had to dig for 12, 14 hours a day in the darkness for gold, for Columbus, the caged mask kept them from committing suicide by eating dirt, which up until Columbus's discovery, not of America, but of a caged mask to keep these people from killing themselves, that history, you're talking about two old farts teaching liberal arts, that kind of history people don't know about Christopher Columbus. The Indians do. And when you told me that they'd effaced it and they threw it in the lake, I'm telling you, my heart jumps. I was teaching Christopher Columbus atrocities 15 years ago, much to the disgust of the administration in the building that I was teaching it. And kids would look at me like, what? This is the same Christopher Columbus? Yeah, same guy.
Yeah.
You know, the great discovery? Is that what he's called? Explorer? Something he discovered like America? Yeah.
Well, so he didn't really discover America, though. That's the thing.
No, the Vikings did. I know that.
Yeah.
But I would walk back and I'd pick up a girl's purse. The girls would put their purses on top of the desks, and I'd grab the purse, and they'd jump up. What are you doing? And I'd say, I just discovered your purse, and they got it.
That's great. I love it.
Yeah.
You know, this country is not called Columbus or Columbia. This is called America. Amerigo Vespucci, folks. Ring a bell?
Mm-hmm.
Another teaching subject for two old farts teaching liberal arts, right? Oh God! And then I've got even more good news here. I have this. This is from Mark Tracy, writing for the New York Times. I'm gonna figure out which one is the oldest article because he's been busy. He wrote this one on June 6th. Stan Wisnowski, the top editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer, resigned on Saturday, days after an article with the headline, "Buildings Matter Too," on the effects of civil unrest on the city's buildings led to a walkout by dozens of staff members. By the way, the same Philadelphia Inquirer that published an opinion piece 3 hours after Trump said he was going to have armed military come into Washington, D.C. to handle the protesters, they wrote an editorial that said Trump has declared war on his own citizens. The same Philadelphia Inquirer, only days after, publishes a story that says buildings matter too. Unbelievable. Let me continue here. Lisa Hughes, the publisher of the Inquirer, the 191-year-old daily owned by the nonprofit Lenfest Institute for Journalism, said in a memo to staff on Saturday that she had accepted Mr. Wisnowski's decision to step down after 10 years across 2 stints as the leader of one of the country's largest newsrooms. The headline of the article, a column by the Inquirer's architecture critic, Inga Saffron, that was published Tuesday, played on the slogan Black Lives Matter, long a rallying cry for civil rights activists protesting police violence against African Americans. It has been a key phrase for demonstrators in the nearly 2 weeks of protests across the country and in cities worldwide since the murder of George Floyd, and I'm going to paraphrase there. The day after the Inquirer article was published, the paper's top editors, including Mr. Wisnowski, who has worked at the paper for 20 years, issued an apology on the newspaper's website, which read in part this, quote, "The Philadelphia Inquirer published a headline in Tuesday's edition that was deeply offensive. We should not have printed it. We're sorry and regret that we did. We also know that an apology on its own is not sufficient. The headline accompanied a story on the future of Philadelphia's buildings and civic infrastructure in the aftermath of this week's protests. The headline offensively riffed on the Black Lives Matter movement and suggested an equivalence between the loss of buildings and the lives of black Americans. That is unacceptable." End of quote. The apology noted that the headline had been created by one editor and reviewed by another before publication. So here's what happened. Here's how the staff fought back on this. They've been working remotely from home because of the coronavirus. They convened for a regularly scheduled video conference that day. Well, that staff meeting turned into an hours-long discussion of newsroom diversity, pay inequity, and other issues. That is according to Diane Mastrel, who is a weekend editor at the paper. She's the president of the News Guild of Greater Philadelphia Union. In an interview, she said, quote, "This week the pain was just so palpable." End of quote.
Yeah.
On Wednesday, staff members sent a letter to management called an open letter from journalists of color at the Philadelphia Inquirer announcing that they would call in sick the following day, and dozens did. The letter read in part, quote, "We're tired of shouldering the burden of dragging this 200-year-old institution kicking and screaming into a more equitable age. We're tired of being told of the progress the company has made and being served platitudes about diversity and inclusion when we raise our concerns. We're tired of seeing our words and photos twisted to fit a narrative that does not reflect our reality. We're tired of being told to show both sides of issues there are no two sides of. Things need to change." End of quote. So they did. They got rid of the editor.
That's what I mean. We're taking action. We're not just talking. We're walking.
Well, I got more. Like I said, Mark Tracy has been busy writing. He wrote this story the day after, on June 7th. James Bennett resigned on Sunday from his job as the editorial page editor of the New York Times, days after the newspaper's opinion section, which he oversaw, published a much criticized op-ed by a United States senator calling for a military response to civic unrest in American cities. A.G. Sulzberger, the publisher, in a note to the staff on Sunday announcing Bennett's departure, said, quote, Last week, we saw a significant breakdown in our editing processes, not the first we've experienced in recent years. End of quote. In a brief interview, Sulzberger added, quote, both of us concluded that James would not be able to lead the team through the next leg of change that is required. End of quote. At an all-staff virtual meeting on Friday, the 54-year-old Bennett apologized for the op-ed, saying that it should not have been published and that it had not been edited carefully enough. An editor's note posted late Friday noted factual inaccuracies and a needlessly harsh tone. The note added, quote, the essay fell short of our standards and should not have been published. End of quote. The op-ed by Senator Tom Cotton, Republican of Arkansas, had as its headline, send in the troops. Quote, one thing above all else will restore order to our streets, an overwhelming show of force to disperse, detain, and ultimately deter lawbreakers. End of quote. The piece published on Wednesday drew anger from readers and Times journalists. Bennett declined to comment. Bennett's swift fall from one of the most powerful positions in American journalism comes as hundreds of thousands of people have marched in recent weeks in protest of racism in law enforcement and society, again, sparked by the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis.
Well, I'm just overwhelmed by all these evidences of a cultural revolution. A lot of people don't realize what a cultural revolution is. We've gone through a couple of cultural revolutions. I don't need to repeat those. Any cognizant citizen should remember what they were in our history. One was called the Industrial Revolution, but I'm pointing out that everything you're talking about paints a mural of a revolution. We're dismantling an entire wave of Confederate monuments in this country. I was in Lawrence, South Carolina, sitting in the town square. This was about 5 years ago. We did not go down to see what was there. And I look up and here's a general, a Confederate general, put up by the Daughters of the Confederacy in a town about the size of Mason, Michigan. Okay. Then on the other side of the Confederate general, there's a list of all of the soldiers, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, that were killed. I thought, that's interesting. I didn't notice that had also been put up by the Daughters of the Confederacy. Then the person was with me. She points over here, look at that little monument. I said, what's that? It's the black soldiers that were killed in Vietnam, South Korea, World War I, World War II. A little dinky sign. They wouldn't even put the soldiers' names on the same monument of concrete as the white soldiers. I said, I can't believe that.
Disgusting.
Who the hell are the Daughters of the Confederacy? Who are they? Well, because they're just quietly there. They put these monuments up, General Lee, they put Jefferson Davidson up in Richmond, but those are the ones that are famous. But they're in every little small town and burg across the United States. And this Cultural Revolution is saying, we're not going to keep these up any longer. We're not going to have the names of forts in the United States with a Confederate general's name on the front any longer. These are people who fought for the establishment and continuance of slavery. And the white crackers down there, they can't stand it. It's incredible.
Oh, it is. Well, let me skip down a little bit in this article here, because after that editorial was published, then all hell broke loose at the New York Times as well. So the reporters have had enough. More than 800 staff members had signed a letter by Thursday evening protesting the publication of Tom Cotton's op-ed. By the way, this is the same op-ed where he wrote, show no quarter, or give no quarter, which is basically dog whistle speak for kill 'em all. Yep. And he knew that because he's former military. Yeah. Tom Cotton is an asshole.
Well, they intercepted police transmissions in New York where they were telling the cops to shoot.
Light them up.
Yeah.
This is scary, folks. But I'm glad to finally start seeing some actual change.
Some actual change, real change, like one of the leading generals in the United States military apologizing yesterday across every major media outlet in the United States, saying he was absolutely wrong to walk with Trump across the street where they had cracked heads of protesters to stand in the church steps with a Bible in his hand. This was a leading military general apologizing for his actions. You know, Trump's had some crazy moments in the last couple of months. One of them was when he said, what was it, last week, that he hoped George Floyd was looking down from heaven and seeing today's job numbers as a great day for him. The real question was, great day for who? For Trump? Yeah, are you trying to say, Trump, that it was a great day for George Floyd to be strangled in the middle of a street and look down and say, well, at least we got good job numbers today, which, by the way, were highly cooked. The books they find now were highly cooked. Unbelievable. It's beyond comprehension. But he'll top that tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh, he will somehow, some way. He always does. Oh,
yeah,
George.
Now he's asking his followers to go to a rally in Tulsa with the largest mass genocidal act where they burn out a whole city of blacks.
Yeah.
On the same exact date, no accident, like Reagan, who went to Philadelphia, Mississippi to announce his candidacy when they worked the white strategy of the South. But no, he doesn't care. But what he did do is he has a form. If you're going to go to that, first of all, you got to buy a ticket. Mm-hmm. If you want to go to that rally, you got to buy a ticket. Then you have to sign a form that says you will not hold Trump or his administration liable if you contract coronavirus at the rally. First of all, it's a mission that there's a hell of a good chance you will.
Yep.
And secondly, if you do, we don't give a damn.
Exactly. You know what, Jack? If Cesar Millan is the dog whisperer, then Trump is the dog whistler.
Yeah.
He really is.
That's no doubt. That's true.
And for you young people that don't really know what a dog whistle is, because I'm not even sure if they're really made anymore. I used to have one as a kid.
They were silent.
They were silent. You blow into it, and you don't hear any noise. But there is sound emitted from it that's at such a high frequency, people can't hear it, but dogs can. That's what's meant by a dog whistle. So what Trump is doing is saying things that most people wouldn't hear, but his base hear it as, oh, we need to take action, you know?
Yeah, and most Americans aren't astute enough to recognize the dog whistle because it is silent, right? Mm-hmm. They didn't realize, again, when Reagan went to Philadelphia, Mississippi, a town about the size of Sparta, Michigan, to announce a presidency of the United States. He wasn't on the steps of the library, of the Hall of Congress, or the Lincoln Memorial. He went to Philadelphia, Mississippi. Nobody could figure out what the hell he was there for. Then you realize it's a KKK stronghold.
Yeah.
They realize it's a dog whistle for the white racist support in the South.
Yeah. Let's explain to our new listeners why Trump picked Tulsa, Oklahoma. In 1921, there was a massacre, the Tulsa Massacre of 1921, where white people went into the black neighborhood and torched and killed and maimed people. This is history. This is what you're not taught in school. I never heard about this. In school. I've never heard about this until I was an adult.
Yep.
But
it's considered the worst racial atrocity in America's history, and there's been many, many of those. But for Tulsa to be ranked number one, and 99% of your students having never heard of it, like you, right? When you went through high school, you had what? I bet you had world history and you had U.S. history, right?
Exactly.
That was mandatory.
Yep.
Never mentioned in your U.S. history book, was it?
It was never mentioned in college either. You want the honest truth?
No, neither was the Ludlow Massacre, and on and on and on it goes.
Yep. But yeah, they burned down Tulsa's business district, the black business district, because they were getting too powerful. They used the excuse of, oh, some African American, they whistled at a white woman or whatever excuse they always seem to use for justifying their violence. But it never happened. They just went in there and killed and looted and burned shit. And it's only discussed because of people like Jack Prince that actually know this stuff happened and get the word out there. There's a black-owned newspaper in Tulsa. It survived the massacre and it still publishes. And they remind everybody, this is what happened. Don't forget, this is what happened in 1921. We just went past the 99th anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre because that happened May 31st and June 1st. This is why Trump's going there.
Yeah.
because
but conversely,
we've
got MAGA firebrands like Candace Owens who are completely misrepresenting history, who I noticed was suspended immediately from her GoFundMe page. Did you see that?
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
Well, that's
who
good
also,
news.
Speaking of the Southern strategy, so aptly employed by Republicans, she said it was a myth. There was no Southern strategy. Of course, she also said she was one real proud Uncle Tom.
Yeah, pretty much. I was just going to ask you, what's the female version of Uncle Tom? Can we start calling him Aunt Candace?
Well, what's the new term for women that call the police and claim a black man's threatening them?
Karen.
Karen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Karen for those. And let's go with the female Uncle Toms. Go with Candace.
Aunt Candace. Yep.
Okay.
Sellout. She's a sellout. She sold her race out.
Yeah. Do we have any stations in
fortune.
Oklahoma? For those people in Oklahoma, it's your first history lesson from Old Farts Teach Liberal Arts.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. I'm serious. You and Joe need to do that. I'm going to make it happen one way or another.
You got me thinking.
Yeah, no, I'm dead serious. You two need to do that, and if I have to help to make it happen, I'll do what it takes.
No, I appreciate that, but I'm thinking of taking a vacation to Seattle. You got free food, free speech, free of police. Hey.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, we have the opposite of that. I want to get to this story. This is something that I've been wanting to talk about since this first came out. There is video evidence. Folks, it ain't made up. There's video of it. I have this story. This is Paul Walsh writing for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. This story was originally published on June 8th, but it's been updated, and the new byline is June 11th. 2 law enforcement agencies acknowledged Monday that officers patrolling Minneapolis during the height of recent protests knifed the tires of numerous vehicles parked and unoccupied in at least 2 locations in the midst of the unrest. Video and photo images posted on the news outlet Mother Jones show officers in military-style uniforms puncturing tires in the Kmart parking lot at Lake Street and Nicollet Avenue on May 30th. Images from South Washington Avenue at Interstate 35 West also showed officers with knives deflating the tires of 2 unoccupied cars with repeated jabs on May 31st. Department of Public Safety spokesman Bruce Gordon confirmed that the tires were cut in a few locations. Quote, State Patrol troopers strategically deflated tires in order to stop behaviors such as vehicles driving dangerously and at high speeds in and around protesters and law enforcement. End of quote. No, that's not what happened. That's not what the video shows. They were parked cars. Oh, they were driving dangerously around protesters. Yeah, I don't think so.
This isn't the only place where the police have cut tires, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you see Cuomo's response to Trump's maintenance that the 75-year-old man who was pushed down by police, whose head immediately started to leak blood out of his ears, he was some kind of an instigator?
That was Trump that said that.
Yeah, I know. And Cuomo said, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
They staged it. Well, they got little capsules of blood in his ear that would just immediately break when he hit the pavement. Well, the dozens of recorded, thank goodness for payphone or for cell phones. I mean, incidents of police violence. Starting with driving trucks over the people in New York to, the guys that was police that pushed over an old man, 75-year-old man, and almost killed him. Without those recordings, we wouldn't have this. We wouldn't have had the recording of the day of the murder. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference.
And you mentioned the guy being pushed over in Buffalo. That group of officers in Buffalo, I'll just call them what they are. They're thugs. They're pig thugs.
Yep.
They are part of the Buffalo Police Department's emergency response team. All the members of the response team resigned Friday night from the team. This team is supposed to respond to riots and other crowd control. They resigned from the team. They haven't resigned from the department. The 2 officers that shoved the 75-year-old man down were arrested. They've been charged with assault. when they got released on bail, those team members, those former team members, were waiting outside the court and were clapping and applauding, supporting these two pigs.
Sickening.
It's absolutely disgusting.
It is.
You know, and I'm just going to give a personal message to everybody listening. If I have one more friend send me the Candace Owens video, you're banned. You're banned from my page. You're out of my life permanently.
Mm-hmm.
The next one that starts with Blue Lives Matter, you're going to get your ass chewed out by me before I ban you and kick you out of my life. It's time to stand up to the ridiculousness of Blue Lives Matter, all lives matter. No,
right.
All lives don't matter until black lives start getting mattered and respected in this country.
Darren, the best cartoon I've seen to that, in a rebuttal of when they say Black Lives Matter and they retort back with Blue Lives Matter or All Lives Matter, it's got a picture of Jesus around his disciples, okay, and he goes, "Blessed are the poor." And one of his disciples corrects him and says, "No, Jesus, blessed are all people." The point being that you have racial injustice, you have economic injustice, and anytime you try to throw an egalitarian blanket over that and say, "Oh, no, all lives matter, Blue Lives Matter." We didn't have police for 400 years put in the bottom of ships and transported over here where they died from lice, where they had to lay on their side because they wouldn't give them enough room to lay on their back. They had to lay on their ribs. Mm-hmm. Many of them died just from lack of oxygen. They were thrown over the edge of ships like garbage whenever they hit a storm, so they didn't sink.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have blue lives put in the whole ship for 400 years and then worked like a lawnmower until they dropped in the fields. So there is not an equality, and to pretend there's some equivalency there is stupid.
It sure is. Jack, we're starting to run a little low on time. There's a story.
Already? It's unbelievable.
It is. We get through this pretty quick here. There's a story that we're not going to get to. It is a very, very lengthy essay. It was published at medium.com. The alias that's used is Officer A. Cab for ACAB, which stands for All Cops Are Bastards. The headline of this essay reads, "Confessions of a Former Bastard Cop." Everybody out there that starts to get a little inkling of Blue Lives Matter, you need to read this. You need to read this to find out where the culture comes from.
Mm-hmm.
These cops are shown videos of officers getting killed in the line of duty, and they're told, those people that you're protecting, they're not on your side. We're on your side. This is division right at the base level of law enforcement.
Serpico.
Yep.
Remember?
Yeah, Frank Serpico. He's a good example of what happens when you try to out police brutality and crookedness by the cops.
True
they
story.
tried to kill him.
Yeah.
Well, Jack, we have hit that point. We are out of time for this week.
That went so fast.
It sure did. Well, folks, we will be back next week, hopefully in person next week. We'll determine that as the week comes along. In the meantime, I'm Darren Gibson.
I'm Jack Prince.
For our announcer, Kristen Cook, please support independent media and the First Amendment.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.